This is Inside Town Hall, a behind-the-scenes look at city government and the issues affecting you and your family.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Inside Town Hall. I'm your host, Madeline Shields. Coming up in the program, we're going to talk about the new proposed budget and some of the wastewater and sewer expansions. We'll have those stories and much more when we return.
They're glowing beacons that light our way. Streetlights in the city of Sioux Falls illuminate our travels, brighten our roads, and keep us safe. So what do you do if you see a streetlight out or malfunctioning? The city of Sioux Falls has made it easy to report a problem in your community with the Streetlight Hotline at 373-6979 or log on to siouxfalls.org. Give them as much information as you can and crews will be out to fix the problem as soon as possible. Thank you for helping make Sioux Falls a better place to live.
When we turn on our water and it goes down the drain, we don't think about where it goes, but today we're going to learn all about why that is so important and how we are as a community and how we pay for that. And joining me today is City Councilor Greg Neitzert, and his guest is Mark Cotter, the Director of Public Works. Thanks for joining us. We are talking about wastewater and sewer improvements. Let's talk about why is that important to the citizens of Sioux Falls.
Well, sewer is critical. We can't develop without sewer. That's the first thing a developer is going to ask is it sewerable? And in addition, we have the public health issue of making sure that we get that water somewhere and we get it cleaned, and the environmental aspect of getting it back to the Big Sioux River clean. So it's one of the most critical things we do as a city.
Okay. And what are we working on? What are we working on right now? The city continues to grow, so that means we need better sewer systems, better wastewater treatment plants.
That's right. So it is a very basic service of what people expect in a modern city today. And it's one of those utilities that's out of sight, out of mind. When you look at wastewater, there's really two key components. There's a whole collection system that runs underneath the neighborhood roads that when you take a shower or wash your dishes and you discharge that down your drains, that goes through your service in a series of collection pipes to eventually actually get to the wastewater treatment plant. Both are in a very highly corrosive environment. The piping system is all underground, and so this city's always had a really good focus on investing in basic services, whether it's water treatment or wastewater treatment. Where we're at right now is just with the continued growth that we have in the city of Sioux Falls, and to make sure that our current system continues to operate and provide reliable service, we've got to invest into our collection system, which makes up over 900 miles of collection mains under our streets. And then we also have to invest in our wastewater treatment plant, which, I think it was our forefathers decades ago bought several hundred acres of land in the northeast part of the city. Most people don't know where the wastewater plant is. And that's a good sign from an environmental perspective, from a growth perspective, and quite frankly, an odor perspective. And so anyway, we're going to talk a lot more about wastewater treatment in the city over the course of the next 5 years. And we're excited to tell people where their wastewater goes and give it a good path forward.
There have been improvements to the sewer systems we've heard about in the last few years. Why is that so critical, and how does that affect homeowners?
Well, it's extremely critical because we have to carry all of that wastewater essentially to one place in town, and it needs to be treated. So when you think about if you live on the west side, that wastewater that you flush down the toilet, for example, has to travel all the way across the city, and it has to make it to that wastewater treatment plant. And as the director stated, we have hundreds of miles of pipes. We have lift stations that in some cases, because we use a gravity system, there are some cases in which we simply have to lift up that water so that we can start the gravity again because of the topology of the land throughout the city. So it's something that we have to continually invest in because it's something where it could be out of sight, out of mind in some cases. And if you let it go, we could have a massive crisis. And we saw that years ago, if you remember the sewer line collapse that we had. And then you have backups into homes, and nobody wants that. So we have to stay ahead of it. And the city has been very aggressive in doing that in terms of cameras in the sewer lines and replacing lines as we need to. And now we're just getting to that point where we're 30 years out, from the last treatment plant, where you have major infrastructure, lift stations, the water treatment plant, that need to be replaced or rebuilt or added onto. And then of course we're always adding more as the city grows.
I think the counselor said it very well. Just with our growth, we've always got to be continuing to invest in, but also look forward. So we just got done with a 2-year study. We brought in a national firm to really work with our planning and building services team along with Public Works to forecast out expected population, and then with population growth also comes additional wastewater flow. And then we took a critical look at the collection system and what investments are needed to make sure we can still move that wastewater efficiently. But then we looked at every treatment process at the plant to get its maximum capacity of each process, and then to understand what elements of the plant actually need to be expanded. And so out of that came a really clear roadmap of what needs to be rehabilitated. We expect the population increase in the next 20 years to exceed 120,000 additional people for this area. And then also, we also expect there's about 26 states in the United States that have already implemented what they call nutrient removal, which just means that the discharge standards to our rivers and streams are getting more restrictive, and so we'll have to add additional treatment processes for that. So in general, the 2-year master plan really informed us what we need to rehabilitate, what we need to expand to prepare for another 120,000 people over the next 20 years, and then ultimately, how do we prepare for those additional treatment standards?
Is this like a neighborhood by neighborhood project? How do you decide which areas need to be fixed or repaired or even dug up and put all new sewer in?
So just in general, so you see like every year we'll do a street project. Could be in a neighborhood or on a major collector street. Anytime we do any level of street improvements, irregardless of this study, as the counselor said, we actually send in high-tech cameras that are all calibrated that walk from one end of a manhole to the next. The manhole's in the system, that's how we access the system to clean it and assess it. We'll camera that sewer before we'll mill an overlay or do any level of improvements. We want to make sure that residents don't go through a street reconstruction project and then 2 years later we have to come back and dig up the sewer. That's not what we want to do. We're coordinating all that type of work. Essentially a master plan would look at, if you envision a tree, and the trunk of that tree is really, that's the trunk sewers. That's the sewer that carries the most wastewater, very similar to roads where it's the arterial streets that carry the most cars. If you look at a typical tree, and then as you go into the branches, those are more the neighborhoods, and the leaves represent the houses. As all that wastewater starts to neck its way down to those trunks, on a master plan level, we want to make sure that those trunks are ready to handle those flows. When we're going into individual neighborhoods, we're cameraing those lines, and we're making those breaches or offset joints at any given time. And so it really becomes the smaller collection system, and I'll say things that are, say, 10 inches of pipe and smaller, we're making those projects and improvements continually. When we're looking at the collection system in a master plan standpoint, we're looking at the trunk line, that key line, whether it's existing or if it's for growth, so we can position the system for the next 20 years.
And something that's really amazing, just so people kind of wrap their heads around it, when we were replacing part of our trunk sewer that leads up to the water treatment plant in the last few years, we went out as a council and we were able to tour, and we stood inside of the trunk sewer pipe. It's 6 feet around. I mean, you could literally stand inside of this pipe, and it's lined to protect it from all the sewer gases. That's how big those pipes are, and that's going to get us another 50 years or so. So you go everywhere from the smaller pipes in the neighborhood coming out of your house, and then it all flows into the big pipes that end up going to the wastewater treatment plant. And so if you can imagine that much volume going through those pipes, I mean, you have to think about the entire city is flowing to one place.
That's a good point with just that project, and that was a fun field tour. It was 2 miles of a 72-inch pipe, and it's the best pipe you can buy today to be restrictive or resistant to the corrosive gases of sewer. Just that one 2-mile section cost over $16 million. And so it just tells you the level of investment it takes to replace this type of infrastructure. And that's really, we've essentially after the collapse, we did more of the triage of those highest assessed areas that we had to focus on. Now we're able to take a step back and go, okay, what are those critical pump stations that need investment? There'll be over 11 pump stations rehabilitated. There'll be a number of key trunk sewers, but then we're going to go at the plant and do a really thoughtful rehabilitation of many of the current treatment processes so we can extend that current infrastructure's life. But then several elements of the plant have to be expanded because when you look at it, it's a very natural process how we treat wastewater with biology and the microbial action that happens, that a lot of that is just tankage. It's time for those microbes to actually do their job before we return that water back to the environment and discharge it to the river. So when you go out to the wastewater plant, you see some of the aerial images, you'll just see these massive buildings. Well, the wastewater has to be in them for a period of time to actually allow the microbes to do their job and do it efficiently.
You were talking about the pump stations. Are there particular parts of town? Is it like the oldest parts of town, or is where we need the most work? Does it grow progressively as that?
It's both.
Okay.
And so some of the things that, some of the areas clearly in the core part of the city, we'll go into some of those lift stations that are 10, 20, in some cases 40 years old, and the electrical systems being in that environment over that period of time, they need to be rehabilitated. There's also new technology where instead of what we call two-speed pumps, where the pump is either on or it's off, now they have variable frequency pumps. So if there's a low flow, the pump runs very slow. If it's a high flow, it can ramp up to a higher variability and pump wastewater. It's much more electrically efficient. There's a number of, when you walk into any closed environment, any structure that has wastewater, the HVAC system has to exchange that air several times a minute. When you have these systems like that for decades, the roofs need to be replaced, those HVAC systems have to be upgraded. So when you essentially go into those environments, just think of that, how caustic that is. And the concrete can break down, it's that corrosive. The pumps can break down, the electrical systems can break down. So we'll be going into the old part, but also when we open up a new area for growth, we don't usually build those pump stations for their ultimate flow. We'll size them for what we expect that flow will be for maybe 15 years, put in smaller pumps, and then in about 15 years we'll go in and put in bigger pumps. And some of this improvements involves that.
That was my other question about the new technology. When you're dealing with massive systems like what you're dealing with, does the technology come quickly? Now you get a new cell phone every 18 months.
Right.
Does it change that quickly? Or if you're looking at new technology and you can afford that, by the time you get it all approved and put it in, is there something new already on the horizon that would have maybe been better? Is that something you have to deal with?
Something that we deal with and something that we embrace. So we've got just about every pump, anything that can affect either the conveyance of wastewater or the treatment of wastewater, we have what we call a PLC, a programmable logic controller. And that can send a signal back to the operator. So if you would see the operator stations, these are state-of-the-art facilities. So at any given time, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we've got to provide reliable wastewater service. We'll do that on a weekend, for example. This weekend that's coming up, there'll only be 2 people on staff. And what they'll be able to do is they'll be able to observe the entire collection system from the control room and the treatment process. That technology has really allowed a lot of efficiencies in wastewater treatment. Now there's a lot of evolution in how we actually treat wastewater, and we'll see a lot of evolution of that even over the next decade. So some of those things that we've been granted some extra time for to actually upgrade to treat additional constituents out of the wastewater, we're counting on some new technology to do that more efficiently and hopefully less costly.
As an elected official and as a department head, we're talking a little bit before we started taping that we take a shower, we flush the toilet, we don't think about it again. Is this something that you get calls about, or is it questions about, how's my sewer running? Is it things that people think about or not? Is that you want it to be like, no, you take your shower and that's the last you have to worry about it?
In some ways, in the best of cases, if they never thought about it, then we're doing something right. Obviously, if something goes wrong, then we're going to hear about it, and that's why you want to be proactive about that, so you don't end up having those issues with those backups, those sorts of issues where there's going to be a public health hazard and a major amounts of damage. So,
I think there's going to be a lot of talk around this entire region about wastewater in the coming years, because not only is Sioux Falls growing, but so are all of our partners from Baltic, Hartford to Harrisburg, T, Brandon. They're all experiencing increased wastewater flows, and what's the appropriate time to be making those investments and upgrades. This entire area, though, has been, I'd say, very forward-looking. When you look at areas like Omaha, for example, Omaha is under what they call some consent orders by the EPA, where they have to invest over $2 billion worth of dollars because they still, in some cases, have their stormwater co-located with their sanitary sewer. And when they have heavy rains, the two can fill up quickly and then overflow. And Kansas City, some of these other bigger metropolises have some of those, what they call combined systems. Sioux Falls started to separate their systems way back in the early 70s and got through that key hurdle, and then went out and found land to build an appropriate treatment plant. The first treatment plant was paid 75% with federal dollars. So all of our existing customers have really benefited from having that initial infusion from the federal government to build a really robust plant. Our rates also show that we've got very affordable rates. When you look at us compared to other cities in the state, we're in the lower half of all those rates. And our job, too, is not only to provide reliable service, but provide it at affordable rates. So we probably don't hear it as much from our customers as they probably do in some of these other areas they're having to spend not millions, but billions of dollars by a certain period of time to make sure that their systems are separated from stormwater and wastewater.
And so you're saying we did it right when we started.
We did it right. We did it right. Our forefathers have always shown a strong investment in water and wastewater. Lewis and Clark was a great investment for this city and this entire region, and investing in our wastewater system will be just the same.
Is there anything that citizens can do to make the processes go more smoothly? I mean, if you want to talk to people about, do this or don't do that when you're dealing with, the wastewater that's coming out of your house.
Well, maybe you want to just share at least the conservation program that's been in place since 2003, and then I can add some more details.
Sure, there's a couple of things. The first, of course, is that we don't want illicit discharge. And what that means is don't put your sump pump hose and discharge it into your floor drain. We should only have waste going into the floor drain. The storm drainage system and the sewer system are two different systems. And if we put illicit discharge in there, we could end up having sewer backups, or you could have your neighbor backup. And so that can be an issue where we may see heavy flows during major rains, heavy flows to the plant, and then we may be reaching capacity. And so you could affect your neighbors if you were to do that. We've had a major conservation program here in the city of Sioux Falls for many years. I mean, so we have, for example, we pay for rebates to get low flow toilets and some of those other things. And there's just a lot of things that we do to try to reduce the amount of water going in. And the other thing that's very important is that our rate structure is built to encourage you to conserve, because we have a very low base rate, and then we charge you per unit of water, the amount of water that you're using, and also the amount that you're discharging into the sewer system. So there's a major reward for conserving and not putting a lot of water into your drain. So whereas in other jurisdictions you may have a very high base rate and you may not get charged as much, so you don't have that incentive to save. Here you get a very low base rate, and if you're very good at conserving, you're going to have a low water bill.
Yeah, you'll have a low water bill and you'll have a low wastewater bill. That's the benefit of conservation, not only on the public side, The city's conservation program, I think, started in 2003. And essentially it started out to say any fixtures that were prior to 1992, and there's a lot of them in town that were prior to 1992, had toilets that would take 3, 5, 7 gallons to flush. Well, now imagine changing that out with a 1.6 or a 0.7. Just what you'll personally save in what we have to sell you in water, and then ultimately what your wastewater bill is. So it really became a win-win situation. I think we're up to now, with all the rebates that we've done to date, it's 4 million less gallons of water per day that we don't have to harvest, treat, send out to our customers, and then ultimately convey in wastewater back to the plant. Just think about that. When you start to add that up over a year's time, that far exceeds 1 billion gallons of drinking water that we don't have to harvest and sell our customers, but then also treat. It's water conservation is probably one of the best things municipalities can invest in to really, not only on the individual home, multifamily, universities, and one of the things we'd love for people to take away is, in some cases we've seen some commercial plumbers tell us, gosh, we thought that you'd suspended that program. So what that told us, that we had to start marketing it again and really get the word out that if you've got a high flow toilet today, whether you're a business, a multifamily, call us, and then we'll work with you to get you the appropriate rebate and get that high flow toilet or shower head changed out to a low flow unit.
Does that include washing machines?
It used to include washing machines, and after, I'd say probably about 10 years, we suspended that because just about everyone now is already high efficiency, and we feel like we've gone through that change. But there's still an opportunity with toilets. It's probably one of the highest water users of a typical resident, and we want people to call us and get those changed out, because it will start to save them immediately on their water bill and their wastewater bill.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
great. Well, it's very interesting to get this information and from your perspective, and how we as citizens can make little improvements that will help the overall big picture.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks for being with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about the proposed budget. We'll be back in just a moment.
This is Dr. Gibby. I'm with Falls Community Health, and I'm here to talk about head lice. If you confirm that your child has head lice, there are many over-the-counter options available. Read and follow the manufacturer's instructions for applying the insecticide carefully. Most are rinsed out of the hair after 10 minutes, however some are required to be left 8 to 12 hours on the scalp. A second treatment is usually required 7 to 9 days after the initial treatment. For more information on head lice, contact Falls Community Health or your local primary care provider.
Welcome back to Inside Town Hall, where we are visiting with City Councilor Greg Neitzert. Thanks for joining us. Now we're going to turn the topic to the budget, and it's about a $500 million budget for the city of Sioux Falls. Let's talk about some of the highlights.
Yeah, it's budget season. We now have a budget in front of us presented by the mayor, and we must adopt it by the end of September. And so now we're starting to dig in and really look at the details. And so there's a lot of things going on in this city, as is usual. Some of the major highlights are we're looking at hiring 6 new police. There's going to be 5 police officers, patrol officers, and 1 new sergeant. We have other employees, including 3 in the Parks Department that will deal with our emerald ash borer issue. They will be in the Forestry Division. And we just have a handful of other employees that have to do with planning and zoning. Those are kind of our major operational issues that we're going to be facing in this next year.
Okay, and some of the other things that will affect, I guess, quality of life in Sioux Falls, a new fire station you're looking at, and some street construction. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, some of the highlights. We have a new fire station scheduled to be built in the southeast part of town, which is growing very quickly, so we're going to be building that, and we're going to be adding, I believe, about 15 new employees with that when that gets built, and that will be 15 new firefighters, of course. And then probably the major building project as far as roads go next year, and it's going to run for 2 years, will be 26 and I-229 interchange, the east side. And that's going to be a major reconstruction. You're going to see the interchange change completely. And in addition, we are also going to have the road go over the railroad tracks at Southeastern, which is a major backup for many citizens. And so it's going to look very different when we're done, and it's going to be a major investment, but it's going to be worth it.
And on the first part of this show, we talked a little bit about the sewer system. That's part of this budget as well, some of the improvements that we heard about earlier in the show.
Yep, absolutely. We have $160 million that's in the budget for the actual upgrade and expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. And then in addition, in our 5-year program, we have $100 million of additional additions around the city to upgrade our sewer system and the lift stations and the pipes and all the things that go with that.
Is there a way that citizens can get involved and hear more about what's going on with the budget and just to learn a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Our budget is online. You can go to siouxfalls.org and find it. You will find our operations budget. That's the budget book. And then you also have the CIP book, which is our capital improvement program that has all of the, basically the stuff that you can touch and feel, the capital, the things that last more than a year. So that's going to be the roads and the sewers and the bridges and all of that, all of those things. And the budget hearings run all of August. And so they'll be every Tuesday, typically around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They're held at Carnegie Town Hall. They're just like any public meeting. They're publicly noticed. They'll be on CityLink. They'll be online. You can come down. You can give input. So we're going to be available. And so for the next couple months, we're going to be deep in the budget, and we'll be taking a lot of input, and we're looking for it.
If anybody wants to get a hold of you or has any questions, how do they get a hold of you?
They can go right on siouxfalls.org. They can find my email and my phone number. My phone number, 367-8109. That rings right to my cell phone, gnitzert@siouxfalls.org. And if they go on and they, on the front page, click on me, they'll find the information for me, that information, and they can get a hold of me.
All right, well, great. Well, thank you for joining us for Inside Town Hall. And again, like Councilor Nitzert said, you can go online, you can look at the budget. It is at siouxfalls.org, or you can watch some of the budget hearings that are right here on CityLink, or you can watch them online again at siouxfalls.org. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next month.